She was already moving, not standing at the edge of the street trying to decide, not reaching for her phone or checking the time. Already moving, her left hand pressed flat against the curve of her stomach the way she had been doing for 3 weeks, automatic now. A relentless check-in, and her right hand pulled inside her sleeve because she had worn the wrong gloves and the cold had cut straight through them 20 minutes ago. The street was empty. That was the thing nobody had prepared her for, not the cold. She had expected the cold, but the specific emptiness of a Seoul street inside a blizzard. The snow swallowed sound until the city seemed to withdraw from her entirely, leaving her alone in a white corridor closing at both ends. She knew this route, had walked it 40 times. 12 minutes from this corner to her building door, and she had been measuring herself against the clock without meaning to because the contractions were arriving in patterns now, and she needed to be inside before the next one came. 7 minutes. Maybe 8. She pulled her coat across her stomach, the fabric straining and stretched, and kept going. The snow was no longer falling. It was arriving, pressing into her like something that had chosen her specifically. Her shoes were wrong for this too. She had made several bad decisions today, the shoes, the gloves, leaving the hospital appointment 30 minutes late, taking the longer route because the shorter one had uneven pavement and she had been afraid of slipping, and she was 4 items into that catalog when she heard it. She stopped, not because it was loud, because it was small. The kind of small that cuts beneath everything, beneath the wind, beneath the blood rushing in her ears, beneath the muffled winter breathing of the city. A voice. Hi. Somewhere to her left, in the narrow alley wedged between 2 shuttered storefronts, she stood for half a second, which is not nothing when you are 9 months pregnant, in a blizzard, 7 minutes from your front door, and a contraction is less than 12 minutes out. Then she turned, not slowly, not with hesitation, her whole body pivoting mid-stride toward the sound. The turn was the decision. She would not be able to explain it later in any way that sounded like a choice because it did not feel like one. It felt like direction, like something inside her had already been aimed that way before her mind arrived. The alley was narrow. Snow drifted hard against the left wall and banked in the corners. She saw the bag first, dark navy, half buried, a small embroidered crest on the front pocket she did not pause long enough to read. Then the shape beside it. A boy, face down. One arm stretched ahead of him like he had been crawling toward something and simply ran out of everything. She was beside him before she had finished understanding what she was seeing, both knees in the snow. Her coat pooling around her and she did not care about her coat. She pressed 2 fingers to the side of his neck, pure instinct, and felt a pulse, thin and quick, and released the breath she had been holding since the alley entrance. She rolled him carefully onto his side. He was 12, maybe 13. School uniform made for indoor temperatures and nothing else. His lips had gone a color she was not going to name. His eyelids trembled faintly, the way they do when someone is fighting toward the surface and the surface keeps slipping away. She pulled her coat off her shoulders. It was the only warm thing she had. She wrapped it around him, both sides, tucked under his body so the wind couldn't reach beneath it, then pulled him against her and made herself the wall between him and the storm. His face to her chest, his weight pressing into hers. One hand keeping him anchored, the other reaching into her pocket for her phone. Emergency services answered on the 4th ring. Location, his condition, hers 9 months pregnant. No, she was fine. The boy was the priority, hypothermia beginning, how long until someone could reach them because it was very cold and she needed a number. The blizzard had overwhelmed the city. Multiple emergencies active. She was told to stay on the line. She said she would. She slipped the phone into the fold of his uniform pocket so the operator could hear both of them, settled her weight deeper into the snow, held him and waited. 8 minutes in, he started to move, not thrashing the small, careful adjustments of someone climbing back through cold toward consciousness. His breathing shifted, shallower for a moment, then reaching deeper. His hand, slack and open against the ground, curled slowly into a fist. She kept her arms around him. She talked. Not about anything specific. Just her voice, low and even, the way you speak to someone when the most important thing is that they know they are not alone. She told him she had him. She told him help was coming. She told him to stay with her. Then the contraction hit. She had known it was building, had been tracking the intervals the whole time, knew roughly when it would arrive, had been hoping it would hold just a little longer. It did not hold. It came the way they always came, slow at first and then not slow at all, a full-body demand that required everything. And she gave it exactly nothing because she was focused on not moving, on keeping the boy still against her chest, on making no sound that would frighten him. In through the nose, out through the mouth. She held the shape of her body around his. The contraction crested and broke and pulled back, and she kept breathing, and she kept holding, and she said nothing to the operator. The boy's eyes opened. Dark brown, unfocused at first, drifting around the edges of the alley, then landing on her face. She watched him piece together the scene, the snow, the cold, the woman, the coat that was not his, and she watched the exact moment he arrived at. "I am alive," he stared at her. "Hey," she said. He said something in Korean first, something she couldn't catch. "I don't speak Korean, I'm sorry. Are you hurt anywhere? Can you feel your hands?" Quietly, in careful English. "I can feel them." "Keep moving your fingers, small movements, don't sit up yet." He obeyed. She watched him flex his fingers inside the fold of her coat, slow and deliberate, and something in his face settled. Not calm, but present. He was present. She could work with present. "What's your name?" she asked. "Joon." "Okay, Joon, I'm Tasha. Help is on the way. You're going to be okay." He looked at the sky above the alley for a moment, then back at her. "Are you okay?" he asked. She almost laughed. She held it back. "I'm fine," she said. She was not fine. Another contraction was already gathering somewhere deep, and she fixed her eyes on the opposite wall, found a single point in the mortar, breathed into it. The contraction arrived and moved through her, and she kept her face still and did not shift and made no sound. When it broke, she was holding him in the same position she had started. Joon was watching her. She met his eyes. "What color coats did your school group wear?" He understood what she was doing. He answered anyway. "Yellow, bright yellow." They had gone ahead when he stopped to look at something. The storm came faster than anyone expected. His phone died, and then he had been walking, and then he hadn't been walking, and then he was on the ground. She listened to every word, asked follow-up questions, kept him talking. Kept them both tied to the ordinary, school trips, bad weather, bad luck. So the alley stayed small and manageable instead of expanding into something neither of them could afford to face directly. The sirens came 11 minutes after her call. If you are wondering what it costs a person to spend 23 minutes in a Seoul blizzard, 9 months pregnant, in active labor, keeping a child alive with their own body heat, while quietly managing contractions she disclosed to no one, the answer is exactly what you would expect. Everything she had. Every reserve she had built, and every reserve she hadn't known existed until she needed it. She spent all of it in that alley, and she did not spend a single unit of it on regret. The paramedics came around the corner and she said, "Over here," and she said it calmly, and they came. The first one stopped when he saw the full picture. He assessed Joon. Then he assessed her. She watched his face move through several calculations at once. "Long have you been in labor?" "Since before I left the building," she said. "But he goes first," argued. She did not give them time to. Now, if you are watching this and asking yourself what you would have done, if you would have stopped, if you would have turned toward that voice, if you could have held yourself together the way she did, I want you to sit with that for a second, because I want to tell you what Tasha looked like when the paramedics helped her to her feet. She looked like a woman who had made a decision and honored it all the way to the end. That is the only thing she looked like. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now and stay with me, because what happens inside that hospital is the part that changes everything. They rode in the same ambulance. She sat upright on the bench, watching the paramedic work on Joon, and breathed through her contractions without making a sound. Joon, drifting in and out, reached up and found the edge of her sleeve without seeming to know he was doing it. She let him hold it. All the way there. At the hospital, they separated immediately. She watched Joon's gurney go left at the corridor junction. He was conscious. She saw his eyes open just before the turn, and he looked back at her over the paramedic's shoulder, and she raised one hand, just slightly, and then the corridor took him and she was wheeled right. The delivery ward was controlled chaos. 2 other women already admitted, nurses moving with the efficiency of people who had worked through worse storms. The nurse who came to Tasha's bedside introduced herself as Nurse Kim, and she carried the precise energy of someone who was going to handle things correctly regardless of what the night chose to throw at her. She ran the assessment, asked questions, got the story in pieces, the route Tasha had been walking, the boy in the alley, the duration, the contractions she had been managing quietly. Nurse Kim stopped writing. "You were in the snow with him for how long?" 23 minutes, Tasha said. "Approximately." "You were already in labor when you found him." "Early stages." "Yes." Nurse Kim was quiet, not the quiet of someone processing, the quiet of someone who already understood and was deciding what to do with that understanding. Did you know who he was? She asked. I didn't know his last name until later, Tasha said. He just told me Joon. Nurse Kim nodded once, finished her notes, put her hand briefly on Tasha's arm, not clinical, human, and went back to her work. What Tasha did not know was that Nurse Kim walked straight to the nurse's station and told the full story to two of her colleagues. Not as gossip, as testimony. Because she believed, with the specific conviction of 15 years watching people at their lowest and highest, that this account needed to exist somewhere beyond a medical intake form. That someone needed to hear it properly. She was right. On the other side of the hospital, a different kind of arrival was taking place. Park Ji-hoon came through the entrance like a man held together entirely by will. Ryu Tae-young at his left shoulder, two staff members behind him, Ji-hoon's face carrying the particular stillness of someone who had spent 40 minutes in a car, not knowing whether his son was alive, and had decided during those 40 minutes that stillness was the only viable option. He gave his name at the admissions desk, was taken to a private room. Stood in the middle of it, not sitting, not moving, while a hospital administrator told him his son had been admitted with hypothermia, was stable, was conscious, and was expected to make a full recovery. Ji-hoon said nothing for a moment, then, who found him? Administrator checked the intake notes. The woman who called emergency services. She stayed with him and brought him in. She was admitted shortly after. Her name, Tasha Lewis. He repeated it once quietly to himself. Not as a question, as the beginning of something. He went to Joon's room. Joon was awake, wrapped in heated blankets up to his chin, with the expression of someone frightened out of his composure and working hard to reconstruct it, a very 12-year-old look. And Ji-hoon felt something loosen in his chest when he saw it. He crossed the room, sat on the edge of the bed, pressed his hand briefly against his son's face, just to confirm what his eyes were already telling him. Joon leaned into it. They sat like that, then Joon said, "Appa, where is Tasha?" Ji-hoon looked at him. "Who?" "The woman who found me. She was pregnant. Where is she?" Ji-hoon did not know yet. He said he would find out. He meant it in the administrative sense, locate, verify, confirm. He did not yet know what he was going to find. Nurse Kim found him in the corridor 20 minutes later. She asked if she could tell him something. He said yes. She told him the way she had told her colleagues, not as drama, as plain facts laid down in sequence. Tasha was 9 months pregnant when she found Joon. She was in early labor before she ever entered that alley. She spent 23 minutes in the snow with him while managing contractions she did not disclose to emergency services, because she did not want to create confusion about whose situation was the priority. She delivered her baby in room 7 approximately 2 hours after admission. Mother and baby were both healthy. Ji-hoon stood completely still through all of it when Nurse Kim finished. He said, "She didn't say anything about being in labor." "No," Nurse Kim said, to the operator. He looked down the corridor toward room 7. He did not move in that direction yet. He stood there a long time after Nurse Kim left, Ryu Tae-young a quiet presence 6 feet behind him, the hospital humming its perpetual rhythm around them, Ji-hoon completely still, and the thing forming in him was not a calculation. It only looked like one from the outside. He turned to Ryu Tae-young. "Find out what she needs. Quiet, completely clear. Medical housing the baby, find out everything and handle it before she wakes up enough to say no. Tae-young. Find out if there is someone with her." Ryu Tae-young was already moving. He came back 14 minutes later with his face arranged the way it was when news was not good. There was no one. She had arrived alone. Emergency contact, an overseas number not yet reached. No visitors, no one waiting. Ji-hoon heard this. Said nothing. Turned back toward the corridor. He had not met her yet. Did not know her face or her voice. Knew only what Nurse Kim had told him and what her intake form contained, and the fact that she was alone in this building tonight. And the thing forming in him, the most complete certainty he had felt in years, was not negotiable with anyone, including himself. Comment below right now. Team she should have accepted the help immediately, or team she was right to push back first. Because that argument is about to get very interesting. Young Hee-soo arrived an hour after Ji-hoon. She came the way she did everything, composed, precisely dressed even at this hour, her face arranged into an expression that communicated control because control was the only condition under which she was safe to be herself. 4 years since the separation. 3 years of shared custody managed with the same precision she applied to every structure in her life. Because Joon was the one place where she could not afford to be approximate. She went to his room first. The Hee-soo who sat with Joon was not the Hee-soo Tasha would meet. She was gentle. She was steady. She touched his hair and did not cry and did not let him see how frightened she had been, because that was her way of protecting him, to perform stability until stability actually arrived. Then she walked the corridor to room 7 and knocked. Tasha had been awake for 40 minutes. Her baby asleep in the bassinet beside her, impossibly small inside the hospital blanket, and Tasha had been sitting up cycling through the same 3 thoughts since she woke. She is here, she is healthy, what happens now? She said, come in. Hee-soo entered the way she would enter any room she had decided to occupy. She looked at Tasha, then at the bassinet, and her face arranged itself into something warm enough to function as warmth without fully committing to it. Young Hee-soo, Joon is my son. I know, Tasha said. How is he? Recovering well, discharged tomorrow. Hee-soo moved to the foot of the bed, not the side, the foot, a deliberate distance. I came to thank you. You don't need to thank me. Of course I do. A small pause. I understand the situation was significant, that you were managing your own difficulty when you found him. Needed help, Tasha said. I helped him. Hee-soo held the look for a moment, assessing. Tasha knew it was assessing and did not look away. Want to make sure, Hee-soo said with careful warmth, that you have everything you need during your recovery. Situations like this can be disorienting. People sometimes, after an experience this intense with a family of a certain profile, sometimes it's easy to misread what gratitude means. To assume a connection that is more than, I don't want anything from your family, Tasha said. Hee-soo stopped. I didn't stop for your son because of who his father is. I didn't know who his father was. I don't know your family. Your son was in the snow and I helped him. That is the whole thing. Room was quiet. Hee-soo's face shifted, not softened, recalibrated. She had arrived with a script and the script had met something it could not accommodate. I see, she said. I appreciate you coming, Tasha said. I hope Joon is comfortable tonight. Hee-soo left. She found Ji-hoon near the nurse's station and told him with precise economy that she had spoken to the woman. He asked what she thought. She was quiet for a moment. The corridor noise moved around them, footsteps, the soft percussion of a hospital at midnight, and she stood in it and considered with the full rigor she applied to everything, what she actually thought. She said, she's not what I expected. Ji-hoon said nothing. He waited, the way he always waited, knowing there was more. She said, she did not react the way people react when they want something from us. She looked me in the eye and told me she didn't know who Joon's father was. She said it the way people say things that are simply true. She said, I don't know your family. Your son was in the snow and I helped him. That is the whole thing. Ji-hoon was quiet. Hee-soo said, that doesn't change my concerns. He said, I know, she said. You are going to do what you are going to do regardless of what I think, he said. I am going to do what is right regardless of what anyone thinks. That is not the same thing. She looked at him. It was one of the things she had always found both admirable and exhausting about him. The way he arrived at his positions and then simply stood in them, unhurried, immovable, without any interest in being agreed with, she said. Ji-hoon. He looked at her. She said, be careful. I mean that differently than I usually mean it. I don't mean be cautious about what she might want. I mean be careful about what you are building here, because Joon is already attached. And attachment, once it forms in him, does not come undone easily. He said, I am always careful, she said. No, you are always thorough. Those are not the same thing. She went back to Joon's room. Tasha was alone. The hospital had gone quiet the way it does after midnight, footsteps and distant monitors and nothing else cutting through. She sat up in the bed running the practical inventory she always went to when she needed to think clearly instead of feel. Apartment paid through the end of next month. Savings, enough for 3 months of careful management during maternity leave, if the terms she had negotiated before the delivery still held. Visa renewal. In process, complicated, had not seemed urgent, not until tonight, lying in a hospital bed in a foreign country with a newborn and no one in the building who was there for her. The complication was a different size now. She noted it, filed it under, deal with first. She did not do afraid the way other people did. Fear needed somewhere to go or it became weather, so she converted it into lists. The list said, get discharged, get home, make the calls, manage things in order. She was still building it when there was another knock. The man in the doorway was not Ji-hoon. Younger. The careful posture of someone trained to make himself professionally neutral. He said, my name is Ryu Ti-young. I am Mr. Park's chief of staff. I apologize for the hour. He had a small card in his hand. Her medical expenses had been settled. A housing arrangement secured for 12 months. A car available at whatever time she chose to be discharged. He delivered this the way you deliver things that are not open to discussion, politely, without the menace of finality, she said. I didn't authorize any of that, he said. No. Mr. Park did, she said. On what grounds, he said. His own. She looked at the card. She did not take it. Tell Mr. Park I'll need to speak with him before I decide what I'm accepting. Of course. He placed the card beside her water glass. He is available whenever you are ready. He left. She picked up the card, set it back down, looked at the ceiling. She had not saved Joon to end up in debt to his father. She had not saved him to be installed in an arrangement she had not chosen. She had not saved him for anything. She had turned toward his voice because it was the only direction that made sense, held him in the snow for 23 minutes, managed her contractions by staring at a single point in a brick wall, and now a man she had never spoken to had decided that her life was his responsibility. She needed to go home. She needed to think. And she saw this clearly, to figure out what happened next before someone else decided it for her. What would you do? I mean that honestly, comment below. Accept the help or handle it yourself. Because I think both answers say something real about the person giving them, and I want to know where you stand. Before she was discharged, Joon came to her room. No one had arranged it. Nurse Kim told her afterward that he had simply appeared at the nurse's station and asked which room she was in, and when they hesitated, he said, "She saved my life and I need to say thank you, and I would like to say it to her and not to someone who will say it for me." He was 12 years old and he said it with the full weight of 12 years, which is more weight than people give it credit for. He knocked. She said, "Come in." He entered slowly, with the self-consciousness of a child trying very hard to be something other than a child in this moment, standing straight, hands at his sides, eyes on her face, and he said in careful English, "I wanted to come before they let me leave. I didn't want to leave without saying it myself." She looked at him. The heated blankets were gone, replaced by regular hospital clothes, and he looked like a regular kid. He looked healthy. He looked like he had slept. She felt something loosen in her chest that she had not known was still knotted. "You look better," she said. "You too," he said, then quickly. "I mean, they told me it was hard. What happened after?" "She's healthy, we're both fine." He looked at the bassinet. His face did the thing it would keep doing, that particular stillness, as though everything else in the room fell away and what remained was just him and the small sleeping fact of Zara. "She's very small," he said. "They start that way." He almost smiled. He pulled it back, the way children do when they want to be taken seriously in a serious moment. Then he looked at Tasha and said, "I remember things from the alley. I was mostly unconscious, but not completely. I heard you talking the whole time." She waited. "You kept saying you had me. That help was coming." He paused. "I could feel that it was hard. I could hear your breathing, but you didn't stop." He stopped, started again. "I just wanted you to know that I know what it cost." Room was very quiet. "You were a child in the snow," she said. "I wasn't going to leave you." He nodded once, the way he always nodded when something was decided. Then he asked, could he come see her sometime? Her and the baby. His father knew where she lived or could find out, and he would not come without asking first. She looked at this boy who had been half unconscious in a blizzard and had still been paying enough attention to know what it was costing the person keeping him alive. "It's allowed," she said. He thanked her. Then he left. She listened to his footsteps go down the corridor and sat with the quiet for a long time. She was discharged 2 days later on a Tuesday morning. The car was waiting. She took the ride. Her own situation was not straightforward. She had a newborn. The snow was still on the ground, and she was not going to make a symbolic point at the expense of her daughter's comfort. She told herself that was the only thing she was taking. Her apartment was warm when she walked in. She had not expected that. The heating was functional but not generous, and she had turned it down before she left because she was always careful about the bills. But it was warm. The kitchen shelf that had been mostly empty had things on it now, formula, yes, but also real food, the kind a person buys when they are thinking about what a new mother actually needs and not what looks correct from the outside. There was a box of the exact tea she had mentioned once to nobody in particular, which meant someone had looked at her grocery history, which should have felt like an intrusion and somehow did not, because whoever had looked had also bought the right kind and not just the obvious kind. A handwritten note from Ryu Taeyong on the table. "Please contact me if anything is missing or incorrect." She stood in the middle of her apartment with Zara against her chest and did a slow inventory of what had been touched and what had been left alone. The practical things had been addressed. Nothing personal had been disturbed. It was the work of someone trying very hard to be helpful without being invasive, and who had, mostly, succeeded. The thing that unsettled her most was not the food or the warmth or the note. It was the tea. That specific detail, not the obvious choice, the right one, said something about how closely someone had been paying attention. She did not know yet whether that should comfort her or concern her. She filed it in the same place she filed everything she had not yet figured out. She held Zara a little tighter and stood there a while, in the warm apartment she had not made warm, looking at a full shelf she had not filled, in a city that was technically trying to take care of her even though she had not asked, and was not entirely sure she wanted it to. Then she put Zara in the bassinet and called the number on the card. She said, "Who authorized the food?" He said, "The standing instruction is that you should not have to ask for anything during your recovery." She said, "I'm going to need to speak to Mr. Park directly, not through you. I understand that's not how this works, but I need him to hear something from me personally, not from a summary of me." Ryu Taeyong said, "I'll arrange it." That same week, on a Tuesday afternoon, Joon came. She did not know he was coming. No one told her. She heard a knock and opened her door, and a 12-year-old boy was standing in her hallway in a coat built for actual winter. A significant upgrade from the last time she had seen him, holding a small package in both hands, looking at her with the focused directness of someone who had practiced what they were going to say and was now executing it. "I wanted to see you," he said in English. "My father knows I'm here. He's downstairs." She looked at him for a moment, then stepped back from the door. He came in. He looked around the apartment with careful curiosity, not intrusive, just present, and then his eyes found the bassinet near the sofa and he went completely still. "Is that her?" he asked. "That's her." He approached the way you approach something both fragile and important, with all the deliberateness of someone who understood instinctively that this was not a situation for sudden movements. He looked down at the baby for a long time. "What's her name?" he asked. There was a pause. Not because Tasha was deciding. The name had been chosen since the 6th month, specific and held close, spoken once in the snow without remembering she had spoken it. "Zara," she said. Something moved in Joon's face. She could not have named exactly what. He looked back down at the baby. "That's a good name," he said quietly. He stayed 3 hours. Neither of them had planned for 3 hours. They talked about what he was reading, about Seoul in spring, about music. He asked how she had come to be in Korea. She told him the honest version. A job, a city she had always wanted to try, the specific feeling of wanting to build something that was entirely hers, with no one else's fingerprints on it. He listened with the complete attention of someone who was not waiting for his turn to speak. At some point, she made tea. Made him hot chocolate. He held the cup with both hands the way children do and told her, without being asked, that he had not been sleeping well since the blizzard. Every time he went toward sleep, he felt the cold again. She told him that made sense, that it would probably ease, that if it didn't he should tell his father because there were people who could help with that. He nodded seriously. He said he knew. Then he said, "I just wanted you to know that I know what you did." She looked at him. "I wasn't fully unconscious," he said. "In the alley, I knew you were there. I felt you keeping me warm. I could hear your breathing and I could tell it was hard. I knew something was wrong with you." He paused. "You didn't leave." Room was quiet. "You were a child in the snow," she said. "I wasn't going to leave you." He looked at her for a moment, then back at Zara. "Can I hold her?" She helped him position his arms. He took Zara with the focused care of someone who had never done this and was not going to fail at it. He sat completely still, looking down at her face, and Zara did what she always did in his arms, settled, quiet, without fuss, as though she had already made her own assessment of this person and found it acceptable. Joon did not move for a long time. A text from Ryu Taeyong sat on the counter. "The car is available when Joon is ready. No urgency." Mr. Park said to let him stay. She looked at the boy on her sofa with her daughter in his arms and thought, this was not what any of this was supposed to become. And yet here it is. Here is what nobody tells you about the walls you build to protect yourself. You build them for the right reasons, because you have been far from home and you have learned the hard way what it costs to let the wrong people in. And then something happens that the wall was not designed for. Not a threat. Just a 12-year-old in your living room holding your baby like she is the most important thing he has ever been trusted with. The wall does not fall, but you notice it. You become aware of it as a structure, and you start, quietly, to look for the door. Joon left when his father called. He handed Zara back with great care, put his coat on, said thank you, then stopped in the doorway and turned back. I come back? Tasha looked at him. You can come back, she said. He nodded with the gravity of someone who had received a serious answer to a serious question. Then he left. She stood in the middle of her apartment for a long time after the door closed. While Tasha was managing her list, calls to make, documents to file, the steady ordinary work of keeping her life upright, somewhere across the city in a legal office, someone was building a different kind of list about her. Hee-soo's lawyers had been thorough. They always were. And Tasha's neighbor, the one who had known she was walking home alone through the blizzard and had said nothing, had been quietly cooperative when they called. Every fact they gathered was accurate. The shape those facts made together was not. A single mother, a work visa in a complicated renewal position, limited financial stability, no family network in Korea, no one nearby who would see what was happening in time to object. The portrait assembled from these true facts described a woman in a precarious position who had saved a billionaire's son and was now positioned, intentionally or not, to leverage that. It was a file built by people who had never spent 23 minutes in a blizzard with another person's child pressed against them. They did not get the chance to present it. Ji-hoon read the file. Put it down. Said 3 words to Ryu Tae-yong. The investigation was closed before Tasha knew it had ever existed. She met Ji-hoon on a Thursday. Ryu Tae-yong had arranged a private room at a small hotel 2 blocks from her building. Not his office, not her apartment, neutral ground. A space that belonged to neither of them and therefore did not tip any balance before the conversation began. She understood the logic the moment she arrived and filed it as a point in his favor. She came with Zara in the carrier. She had not planned to. She had called the neighbor across the hall who had offered twice to help. But Zara had strong opinions about the morning hours, and Tasha had decided not to fight them today. Ji-hoon was already there when she arrived, sitting at the small table, hands folded on the surface, and he stood when she came in. He was not what she had assembled from the composite of Joon's face and Hee-soo's manner and Ryu Tae-yong's precise delivery. He was quieter than all of that. He had the quality of someone who had occupied a great deal of space in the world and had made peace at some point with being still inside it. He looked at Zara. Something moved in his face. Thank you for coming. Thank you for arranging it somewhere neutral, she said. I noticed. He nodded. Please sit. They sat. She told him what she had come to say, the way she had prepared it, without anger, without performance, just the clarity of someone who has thought something through completely and is delivering it in final form. She had not gone into that alley for him. She had not known who Joon was. She was not a problem to be managed. She did not want the housing arrangement or the settled expenses. She wanted to return to the position she was in before the blizzard, a woman managing her own life in a city that was difficult and entirely hers. He listened to every word, did not interrupt, did not look at Zara again until she had finished, as though he understood that looking away would be a form of deflection. When she was done, silence, then, I heard you, she waited. And I want you to know, he said, that the visa renewal you were managing has been resolved. She stared at him. She had not come here to accept anything. The refusal was prepared, organized, ready. And then he said the one thing she had not built a defense against, reached past every wall she had constructed, because he had found the problem she was most afraid to name and had quietly removed it while she was still in a hospital bed. It was in a complicated position, he said. I found out and I addressed it. If you want to tell me I overstepped, I'll accept that. The work is done and cannot be undone. Your status in this country is no longer under pressure. A pause. That is not a transaction. I don't expect anything in return. I am telling you because you deserve to know and because... He stopped. Started again. Because you were 9 months pregnant and in labor and you chose my son over yourself. The least I could do was make sure the country you chose to build your life in did not take that from you while you were in a hospital. Zara made a small sound against her chest. Tasha put one hand up to hold her there. She was quiet. The refusal she had organized was still present, technically, but it had no target anymore. He had done the one thing that mattered most without asking permission, and she was sitting with the strange, specific feeling of being helped in exactly the right place by someone she had not asked. That was a very significant thing to do without asking, she said. Yes, he said. It was. I need you to understand that my life is not available for decisions that don't involve me. I understand that now. I'm asking you, going forward, to tell me where the line is before I approach it. I'm not always good at seeing lines that other people have built. I am trying to see yours. She looked at him for a long time. There was nothing in his face she recognized as manipulation. No strategy, no calculation, none of the particular confidence of someone accustomed to getting what they wanted through the force of what they could offer. What was there was harder to name. A man who had made a decision in a hospital corridor and had not changed it and was not going to, asking only to be told where he was allowed to stand. Not a romantic overture. Not a business proposition. Something older and far less convenient than either, an acknowledgement of a debt that could not be settled, from someone who had accepted that, and was asking only to be allowed to try anyway. Joon wants to visit again, she said. I know. I told him he could. Ji-hoon looked at her. I know that too. Told you. Hasn't stopped talking about it for 3 days. Something shifted in her face, not quite a smile, but something. He's a good kid, she said. He is. A pause. He is better since that afternoon than he was before it. I don't know what you said to him, but he came home different. She thought about Joon with Zara in his lap, the complete stillness of him. He held my daughter for almost an hour, she said. He didn't want to put her down. Ji-hoon said nothing. He looked at the table. There was something working in him quietly, the way things work in people who are not going to show you the full extent of what they feel but are not pretending to feel nothing either. Investigation, she said. He looked up sharply. Your ex-wife had someone looking into me. A pause. I know. It's closed. It's closed. What happened to it? I read the file they built, he said. And I closed it. He looked at her directly. A file that describes a woman who spent 23 minutes in a blizzard keeping a child alive while managing labor contractions as a potential liability. He stopped. I don't work with that kind of analysis. She held his gaze. Sue's fear is not cruelty, she said. I want you to know I understand that. He seemed genuinely surprised. That is a generous position. It is an accurate one. She came to see me in the hospital before you did. She was afraid before she was anything else. I could see it. Fear in women who have had to fight for everything they have comes out looking like precision, like calculation, like her. Tasha paused. It doesn't mean she was right, he said. It doesn't. It means she's not the villain of this. He was quiet for a long moment. No, he said quietly. She isn't. They sat in the quiet, and the conversation wound down the way real ones do, not with a summary or a resolution, but with a natural resting point. Two people arriving at the same place from different directions. Before she left, he said, whatever she needed, whenever she needed it, the offer was open. Not a transaction, not a claim. A standing fact. She did not have to accept it today or tomorrow or ever. But it did not expire. She stood with Zara against her chest and looked at him and said, I'll let you know. He nodded. She left. She walked out into the Seoul afternoon, her daughter warm against her chest, and carried with her the specific feeling of someone who had gone somewhere prepared to refuse everything and come back holding something she had not planned to accept. It was not a defeat. It felt like the first time in a long time that this city had given her something without requiring her to fight for it first. She did not know what to do with that feeling yet. She filed it where she filed everything she had not figured out, and she turned her collar up against the cold and kept walking. On a Saturday 3 weeks after the blizzard, Soo came to Tasha's apartment. No one told her to. Her lawyers did not know. Her sister, who had spent 2 weeks carefully feeding Soo's anxiety with selected information about Tasha, each piece true and the picture false, did not know. Soo had woken up, looked at the ceiling for 20 minutes, gotten dressed, gotten in her car and driven herself. She knocked. Tasha answered. Soo looked at Tasha and at Zara, awake and alert in the carrier, and was quiet for a moment. Not here to cause problems, she said. I didn't think you were. Come in. Soo sat in the chair by the sofa, the same chair Joon had sat in, and looked around the apartment with a look that was less assessing than the one she had worn at the hospital. More careful. Like someone trying to see something clearly and aware of their own tendency to distort it. They talked for 40 minutes. Not easily, not warmly, but honestly, which was better than either. Soo said she had come because she needed to see the person instead of the file. Tasha said she understood that. Soo said she was not going to apologize for her concerns because her concerns were structural and reasonable, and she was not in the habit of apologizing for things that were structurally reasonable. Tasha said she didn't need an apology. Soo looked at her. What do you need? She asked. To be left alone to make my own decisions, Tasha said, and for Joon to be allowed to visit without it being an event every time. Soo was quiet. He talks about your daughter constantly, she said. I know. Told me her name. A pause, quietly, like it was something he had been keeping. She looked at Zara. He's not wrong about it. She left shortly after. No promises. No warmth offered in any conventional form. But at the door she turned back and said, with a precision that cost something, "You are not what I expected you to be. And I am going to try to factor that in going forward." There was more behind her face as she said it, something that started to form and then pulled back before it arrived. A sentence she did not finish. Tasha did not push for it. Some things needed more than a Saturday afternoon. Some things needed time to become whatever they were going to become. It was not an alliance, not a reconciliation. It was a woman who had kept her back against a wall for a very long time, choosing, consciously, to take 2 steps forward. Tasha watched her go. Joon came back the following Wednesday, after-school coat, small cloth bag carried with both hands. He came in, sat in the chair, and said, "I brought something for Zara." He reached into the bag and pulled out a small hand-painted card. She could tell he had made it himself, careful and slightly imperfect and completely genuine, the kind of thing that takes time without being practiced. In the center of the card, in both Korean and English, was a name, Zara. She went very still. "Did you know her name?" she asked. "You told me," he said. "I didn't tell you until you came here." He was quiet for a moment. "You told me before, in the alley. I don't think you knew you were saying it." "There was a moment when you went very still and said something quietly. Just one word, Zara." He paused. "I was mostly unconscious, but not completely. I remembered it." She looked at the card. She had spoken Zara's name out loud exactly once before the delivery, in the alley, in the snow, managing a contraction, holding this boy against her, going to the thing that mattered most in order to stay present. The name she had been keeping for her daughter. The thing she held on to when everything else was cold and hard and uncertain, and a half-conscious 12-year-old had heard it and held it and brought it back to her. She sat down because she needed to sit. "You remembered that," she said. "I remembered everything you said," he told her. "You talked the whole time. I could hear you even when I couldn't answer. I knew you were there." He paused. With the directness of someone who has decided to say the whole thing. "I knew what it was costing you. I couldn't say anything yet." Room was quiet. Zara made a sound from the bassinet. Both of them looked at her. Joon reached into the bag again and pulled out a small, soft toy carefully chosen, in the exact colors of Zara's corner of the room, which he had noticed on his first visit without being asked, and had stored and remembered with the specific precision of someone who pays attention to what matters. "I picked it out myself," he said. "My father said I should let Tae-young handle it. I said no." She looked at the toy. She looked at him. "Joon," he looked at her. "Thank you." He nodded the way he did when something was serious. Then, "Can I hold her?" She lifted Zara from the bassinet and placed her in his arms, and he held her with the same focused care as before, someone who had never done this and was not going to drop her, not ever, not once. He sat completely still, looking down at her face, and Zara settled the way she always did in his arms, quiet and without fuss, as though she had already decided on her own terms that this was a safe place to be. The afternoon light came through the window at a low angle, the particular Seoul winter light that has no warmth in it but plenty of clarity, falling across Joon's hands and across Zara's face, and across the card on the table with the name in 2 languages. Somewhere outside, the city went on, a train, a distant horn, the low sound Seoul makes when it is simply going about its business, indifferent and magnificent and entirely unaware that anything of consequence was happening in this apartment on this Wednesday afternoon. The radiator clicked once in the corner. Zara's hand opened and closed in her sleep, the small reflexive motion of a baby deciding things in a language that has no words yet. Joon watched it and did not move. Tasha sat across from the boy who had heard her daughter's name in a blizzard and held it until he could give it back, and she understood something she had not understood before. Not about gratitude, not about obligation. She had been thinking about those for weeks and had her positions. Something smaller and more certain than either. She had turned toward a voice in the snow because it was the only direction that made sense. She had held a child she did not know with everything she had because he needed it and she was there. She had not done it for anything, not for whatever came after, not for this card or this boy or any of it. She had done it because the alternative was to keep walking, and she could not keep walking, and that was the complete explanation. But what came after, the boy here, the baby in his arms, her daughter's name kept safe through a blizzard and returned, that was not nothing. That was something she had not planned for and could not have predicted and did not entirely know what to do with. And she sat in the afternoon light and she let it be what it was. If you have been watching this story and thinking about the people in your own life, the ones who showed up when they didn't have to, the ones who turned toward instead of away, hold on to that. Because that is what this story is really about. Not the money, not the power, not even the gratitude. The turn. The single moment of turning toward someone else's need when every practical reason said keep walking. Subscribe if this is your kind of story, because there is so much more of this to tell. And leave me a comment about the moment that stayed with you, because mine is Joon in the snow, half-conscious, reaching up to hold the sleeve of a woman he had never met, because she was warm and she was there and she was not leaving. That is the whole thing, right there. That is the whole thing.